I hope that's what you say to yourself right after your alarm every day.
I got woken up today by a text message. My
Okay.
alarm did not go off, and at
Nice.
7:11, I was like, "Oh, it's bright outside." I'm usually coming up now with the sun. I'm
Yeah.
already outside with the sun.
When is daylight savings time? I need that extra hour. Let me look that up.
It's this weekend.
Oh, beautiful. Okay, beautiful.
Wait. It doesn't. Wait, I'm so stupid. Is it going forward? Is it going backwards? Do we get an extra hour, or
We
do we
we
get
get an
no?
extra hour. We get an extra hour.
Oh my god. Because I'm flying out on daylight savings. I'm flying home on daylight savings day. So I was like, well, am I going to wake up and all of a sudden it's like, wow, it's 9. No, it's 10 and you need to be at the fucking airport. Like, you're fucked, dude. My whole
Okay.
idea plans for like breakfast were going out the window there for a second. But if I get an extra hour in bed in a hotel room, I'll take it. Are you kidding me?
Oh yeah, yeah. I didn't know it was coming up. It's always random.
Yeah, well, I mean, it feels unnatural. It's like, oh wait,
Yeah.
time just we're just all gonna collectively say like time just moves an hour. Like, all right, well, time doesn't fucking matter anyway. It's like, what are we doing here? Might as well all just be living in loincloths. You know, like fucking whatever, dude.
That's exactly the problem.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, how if my computer needs time to move, and if you just change time, I don't know. I'm being stupid. I'm so fucking tired right now. I've been up all night sending emails, trying to get situated, trying to do the media stuff. But, you know, what I mean, if you're in New York City, come see Batsu at Play NYC in New York. Go buy a card game. Getbatsu.com. It's fun.
See, that's
It's
right.
great.
We're not just two random designers with no products out there. We got ones.
No, I'm definitely that random. I'm definitely I'm useless, dude. But it is what it is. But yeah, no, it's been to get into this. We've been having conversations off screen, getting up into this call. But uh, yeah, I mean it's just been a busy, eventful time for both of us getting into the final stages of the year. You with trying to get the game ready to launch and learning a lot more about what it means to just polish up the game. You know, what is it meant? You know, what does it really mean to do that last 15%? Because it doesn't feel like 15%, does it? It feels like
Oh,
half of the game.
oh, for sure.
Like, is it coming together though in your mind?
Well, see, that's the thing. Like, I the lesson I'm learning here. So I'm a great prototyper. I can make prototypes, novel ones and fun ones that people haven't seen before. But then to make a game that lasts long, basically, that I feel like is a different skill set and knowledge base than just prototyping. And that's unfortunately I've been like hitting my head against different things. And you look at just let's just say mobile, and you look at mobile, and a lot of these games have like let's just say like stage based progression. You go 1-1, then 1-2, 1-3, and you're like, you know what, maybe we don't need to do that. And you try to innovate and try something else. And then like I'm realizing, oh man, I'm kind of realizing why they did that in the first place. And it's like if I was more of a cloner and just copied and just felt comfortable copying things, I would have done that and never ran into this. And then now I guess I'm kind of running into fundamentally why you might want to do something like that. So that's kind of the pattern. I'm kind of like re I'm kind of reinventing the wheel, but I'm understanding why the wheel is there. So it's both a good thing and I guess bad due to time.
Yeah, yeah, that's a big thing. I mean, look, there's pressures on all sides there. You know what I mean? If like, it can't go out not well. You know what I mean? It needs to go out with the feature set that you're confident in. But it also just it needs to perform in market, and if you don't feel like that the feature set is going to provide that right now, or just even the stretch of content, then yeah, like I mean, it's gonna just be a little bit more time. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
this is where like usability tests and just getting more eyeballs in earlier, you know what I mean, can help out with some of these things, even if it's just showing the game to your friends or starting there, but really then like um, just taking the app to the coffee shop, to like a store, and just being like, I will buy you a coffee. I will buy your coffee if you play my game for 15 minutes. I know it
Nice.
sounds kind of mad, right? But like, these things help to just like get objective, on the street first impression behavior in, and I mean, the little incentive of people, buying the coffees doesn't actually taint that, but at least you're kind of buying that opportunity. It sounds kind of mad because it's like whatever these days, like fucking $5 a goddamn cup of coffee at Starbucks.
Exactly.
It's like I'm gonna be in the hole, dude. Like I might as
Exactly.
well be buying drinks at the bar or something like that, right? Like, but
Yeah, it was like, hey, I'll let you sip my coffee for a test.
yeah, 100%. I will let you sniff the beans, sniff the empty bag that it came in.
Yeah. Oh, dude, speaking of which, I was at the grocery store and usually I pick up like a 60 pack of eggs.
Yeah.
And
Oh my
man, the
god,
egg,
wait, we're gonna come back to this. Wait, you get 60 eggs at a time.
yeah, hey, you gotta buy
What the
bulk
fuck?
now.
Who the
Dude,
fuck is going through 60 eggs?
so hey, eggs last forever, but usually I never really looked that much at the price because they were always kind of cheap. But they're like $20 for 60 eggs. I was like, wait a minute, this is like twice as much as it was like a few weeks ago. So, and oh, here's the easier one. A jar of tomatoes was $8. Or not a can of tomato sauce, basically. It was
Oh,
$8
eight?
at King Super. Yeah,
$8?
it's like, wait a minute, wait a minute. This is like normally 230 of
So,
ragu.
whoa, $8?
Yeah, so something happened this week. So yeah, talk about inflation. So
King Soupies, man, going
yeah, exactly.
downhill. I, I'm
And
I'm such a nerd when it comes to cooking, right? Like my girlfriend and I would go into the grocery store and then we go like, hey, let's just make something simple. Like, oh, okay, great. And then we walk and we're like, well, we'll make pasta, we'll make some sauce, and then all of a sudden over here I'm like, well, I'll just make the fucking pasta myself. It's not that hard. It'll only take me 15 minutes. And then I'm like, I don't want any of these pasta sauces. I've got blackened garlic. I mean, just grab me some tomatoes. Or I mean, I'll just go make the sauce.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I just end up making bolognese at fucking like, and we're not eating until like 11:30, and we've started cooking at 7, and all of a sudden it's like, oh no, the sauce has to cook down for a second. I know my missus gets mad at me for things like that.
But it's probably 20% more delicious than
Well,
that.
yeah, we got into a whole tizzy about I wouldn't buy her almond milk because I was like, I just have a moral almonds they cause drought in California, and then that water shortage then peels into Nevada, and that hits us in Colorado. It's like we shouldn't be making almonds in fucking
Some
California.
somebody's got to be environmentally conscious here
I'm the worst.
because I'm not.
Yeah, that's because you're in the Springs, dude. You don't care.
That's right. That's right.
People in the
Exactly.
military town. We got pickup trucks.
Exactly.
I'm just over here in my little Boulder bubble, just being like, everything should be green. All things ever should just be green. Bears should be allowed to just maul people in the streets. It's okay. Don't harm them. We're in their space. Yeah, no.
Anyways,
Right,
what were we
that
talking
was
about? Oh yeah,
way
playtesting. Playtesting for
off.
$6, honestly, $6 coffees.
No, for real. But like,
Yeah, six.
but you know what I mean, though, right? Getting more eyeballs quicker is gonna help you to frame up as well how you want to pivot too. Because one of the things you can't do is like move your, get stuck in your own brain of just being like, yeah, I could add that feature, and I think that would work, and I think that this would be okay, and that's fine to have that as like a hypothesis, but there's a couple of ways you need to either prove that that is the right way, but one of them is understanding the absolute foundation of your problem, and
Right.
to me it's like you're too close to it. I'd be too close to it in a lot of instances. Just any game like that we're working on. You can identify them, but can you really get into it? Or and sometimes you can't identify because you're just not seeing how players are actually
Right.
going to play the thing. You know what I mean? We have that model of how we think it's going to happen in our heads, but then when you get into it and you're like, oh, it's not there. It's just not there at all. But here's the nice thing again. It's like, is the core is good though. the core is there, you're
Yep.
done, you're ready to go. Then you mean this is just the pivot. This is the first time you've done this though, right? To this level as well.
Yes, it is the first time I've honestly tried to make a fully fleshed out game.
Yeah. Then it's I mean this is all learning curves. Like I've never had
Right.
to I haven't done it myself because I haven't actually been the developer like writing the code to do it. But I've been there for all of like the like let's make the content, let's do the thing. Like I've obviously shipped a game, so it's just like it's it's always a mad dash push and it never feels great. Never always
Yeah,
feels
I
great.
think if I had to identify maybe the fundamental problem you have to solve is the content treadmill. You always have to be aware of how your systems create a treadmill. And like when you look at a lot of these, let's just say an idle game, like a hot one is Idle Berserker, and
Mm-hmm.
all it is it auto battles and moves forward. You'll spend and buy better gear, and it just pushes you to a stage where the enemies can handle that gear. It's kind of like clicker heroes. So it's infinitely scalable. Like the treadmill just scales itself. The devs don't have to do anything. That's like a dream scenario with a tiny content treadmill. But other games like Candy Crush. I mean, Candy Crush has they have a shit just a ton a ton of level designers, and they take I think they said either 4 or 8 hours to create a level, and then just a few minutes for a dev to go through it or a player to go through it. So you know it's something to consider.
Yeah, that's funny because like yeah, like I've I purposely designed Nuzly over the last couple of years to just be like to make level creation be as quick as
Yeah.
possible. And coming into the final pass, they've been focused so hard on not even like improving the game. Like the dev team is working obviously on like all of the last minute features and try to get all the as much animation stuff in as possible. But one major thing has been like make content implementation as easy as possible. So now they have a bubble pop grid visual tool that you can make like make you can click in the whole pattern into the level, export it instantly to the data format, and just like make it just like will make its own level. It'll literally just one button inside of the scene, and it will just dump that file to your computer, so that even then like um, you can save, you can load, you can do all of those things. But on top of all of that, there's external Python tools that can take patterns of data. So if you make like a nice pattern in the bubble pop grid, you could take that data, put it into the Python thing, mix it with all of these other patterns, and if you have a library of like 100 plus patterns, then all of a sudden then you can just start generating levels. So you could just like if you have enough data to be able to do nice things, you can just like have it all just stream out. So the biggest thing for me is more intrigue in bubble pop, right? There's obviously something else there that we're not respecting, or I mean, the game at this point is not respecting. Uh, but the levels still look nice, and the thing is, if you can make nice patterns and then just layer nice patterns with other nice patterns, then you can get some newer nice patterns, or at least that's the hope, right?
So you guys also have a narrative side to the game. How difficult is the narrative content treadmill?
Yeah, so it's huge, right? So for that game in particular, the player is uh, interacting with dogs, and every dog has their own story, all the way from the find flow, all the way through their treatments, all the way through their adoption flow. Every moment that we can inject story into, and we haven't done every single moment. We should be doing it in every moment, but it's really right now is like every user action generates more story. So our content lock and driver is narrative, and the hope is that as as a key, that's going to keep players wanting to play because they're going to want to see the stories unfold. So the
Right.
stories need to be good, right? Like they need to be entertaining, engaging, energetic. They need to really tell the story of that character. And when I was working on this, um, which I'm not anymore, but I mean the team is working on it, and I obviously did it for 2 years, so it's like, I mean, can't take that back. Um, the biggest push was that the story, it is narrative as a driver. That is it, right? Like that is what players are going to consume. That is what players are going to push down. And the sad thing is that when you need to have then from the economy modeling like 60 plus dogs at soft launch and then 108 for global, that's like a lot of story and a lot of writing and a lot of things. So like
Yeah.
you're not just writing it all yourself. And yes, you could just farm it out to a bunch of different writers in other countries or other places and just get, just pay per word and make that work. But culturally, it might not line up too. So it's like not everybody has the same culture and background around dogs, right, as the US does, but specifically like certain areas within the US. So uh, what we did was is we actually wrote a bunch of individual stories like for the action itself, and then took those as like lines, right? And then built an algorithmic tool to then organize all of those lines. So now a designer, all they need to do is just go and say, this is the dog's name, these are the treatments that dog is going to do, and then who do you want to say what line? And later on, it will be added in that you can then, as a designer, you can choose what emotion you want the character to say. Like if you want them to be confused, because if you could imagine, Simlish by itself is just a emotional crisis, right? Like it is conveying an emotion when two characters are like speaking to each other or characters on their own, and then we take that emotion and then interpret our own meaning off of how we see that character moving in context of like what they're doing, right? They're pissed off that they can't play guitar. It's like, yeah, like they're, I mean, you can see it. They don't need to say it. Um, but in the same way here, it's like conversations have emotional beats, and so we don't necessarily need to know what the exact underlying line is, but if I can build tension by having like happy, or like like the NPC dog is like extremely sad, or it's extremely like scared and angry, right? So like the first couple of lines are all like aggressive text lines. Well, then I can match the aggression with the player's emotion, and I don't care about the line, but I can say confusion, reassurance, upbeat, and then all of a sudden maybe then that offsets the conversation and then drags it into a different way. So it's like, to me it's always been like, where's what is happening on the emotional beats to get the player through the game rather than what the actual content of the conversation is. um,
Okay.
but again, we actually, instead of just write story, which we that the team couldn't support, uh, trying to be as smart as possible with your content, and then also saying like, we will backfill later, right? get get to your content cap for for soft launch, and then get into the wild, see what's not working. Like if it just isn't resonating at all with players, maybe there's just too many different algorithmic dogs or whatever, then you need to you know go back and start adding in, figuring out like, where do I want my fresh stuff, where can I put it, like where's the lull in my game, and I can start like moving in more of this like hand knitted content into it. But a lot of that is like, many hands make light work. But if if you get that, you have to find the individuals who understand what it means to have a dog and what their perspective is too. And one of the, it's just like it's hard because like if you don't get that, if you've never had a pet, or like you've never really interacted with a pet, like can you really write that story the way that you want, the way it
Yeah.
needs to be too, so there's a whole lack there that you can either spend way too many time. If you have money, you spend time in people, but if you don't have money, you build tools and be smart. But you always build tools, like coming into these last pushes, like you want to make sure that content getting into the game is as streamlined as possible, because you're gonna need it as soon as you get out of the gate. All of a sudden, it's gonna be this mad rush of like, oh crap, like I gotta fix 100 bugs, but also everybody has hit the end of level content, and I'm like, it only took them 13 days. Like fuck, like not good.
Yeah. As you were talking, I thought of a kind of a conceptual way of thinking about it. Uh, you, I was thinking about, so you said narrative as a driver. So you have your big juicy bits that in your game that really drive your player to play, and I am thinking that those drivers are generally like the most expensive part of the game to make. Uh, they're the big cinematic that drives you to go, or some big upgrade that is like wild. Now you're hitting everything. It like it's just hard to implement in some way. So of course, like what you said, you can and you should make those as easy to code up as possible. So streamline your tools. But there's another way. So the conceptual map I had was, the if you think about Pac-Man, Pac-Man has all your small pellets, and that those eventually lead to your big pellet. So what you can kind of do, which is another strategy, is to like stretch out the smaller content somehow. So in your case, it's the actual bubble pop style stages that are in between all your big moments. And I think that is important, and that's another way to approach this whole thing. So it all leads up to again the content treadmill. Figure out your not just your bottlenecks and make it easier to make, but man, try to stretch it out while still being interesting. If you can make, let's just say in theory, let's just say you can make people spend 10 minutes in a stage like that and have it be fun. I mean, man, that'd be amazing. Like it's just so much easier on you. You're making more money because you don't need to buy 20 devs to make that content, sort of thing.
Absolutely. I mean, you got to cut costs when you're small. So tools and content generation and procedural generation of all of these things will really help. Being smart with the tools that you have will really help, and just making sure that you like crossover. It's fine to make 5 more levels with the same kind of content, but just know that it's gonna go stale for the individual user. So you have to be ready to kind of like backfill. So I always say it's just like have too much, unless you're trying to just very specifically show an experience, right? Then have little, then have very lean, and make sure that that lean is the exact experience for like 1 or 2 iteration loops that you're looking for, and then post it to the player base of like, this will build over time, right? So but if you're doing that and you really only have that much, you're probably still testing out the waters of, does your core even retain, is it even entertaining or anything like that. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's just difficult, right?
And there is one thing I learned about your first players that is a little unobvious and is a little unfortunate. So your first players that jump into your game, they're called the golden cohort. They are your most engaged players. They're people who are like, oh yeah, I've been waiting for this game. So not only are they gonna be some of your best players almost ever, but they're also really cheap to buy. They're the lowest CPI. They're the easiest to hit with your ad campaigns. So if you only have 2 days worth of content, that whole golden cohort will actually leave your game. So
Yeah.
when you do get to soft launch, at least consider having enough content to keep those guys because they are valuable.
Yeah, and really like the only way you kind of get the golden cohort is if you've done specific like newslettering beforehand and everything like that. Like the point is there is that like people who have been put your app on pre-order, right? You maybe have UA'd against the App Store page and said coming soon, and tried to then get people into that mode. So you have 3,000 plus people or something like ready day one to email blast and say the game is live, like go get it now, right? Those are the
Yep.
people who sought out your game at the beginning, who you were able to capture their email, capture them as a person, a snapshot in time, and then you can store that and then engage them later on, um, or throughout development. Really, you know what I mean. At the same time too, so it's important to know it's like you can't. It's not just going to be like put out an app and then get a bunch of users in. Like you'll find some organic traffic, but those people aren't necessarily like the golden. They're not the people who have like been waiting for your thing. And the only way to get that is yeah, it's just have put the effort in up front for all of the pre-order coming soon,
Yeah.
and then every one of these games, right? They have launch parties, right? Like you, the first 60 days that you launch the game, there's some event that's running. It's like I can get double currency or something like that. You know what I mean? Just off of being here or something like, what I mean, within the first thing, or here's a starter pack, or here's like an exclusive like item for just coming in at the very very beginning, and this is going to go away, and it's first edition banner or something like that. You know what I mean? These things do help, and I think that Raid Shadow Legends is like a good metric to look there later on, which is like everybody who comes from the UA spend gets that starter pack whenever they want, and that was a change up of the model. Usually it was like we're only running this event for the first couple of days that the game like properly globally launches, and then after that we're turning that faucet off because it's like a lot of currency, right? Like that you're just like injecting into the early game, and it kind of ruins your early game balance. But if it's built into your progression tree, and the point is to retain players to day 14 as hard as possible, then that initial currency boost will get them through the lull of the start and then push them into the mid game faster. And the faster you can get players to the mid game, the usual more connectiveness, you know what I mean, that there feels to that app, because they've, theoretically engaged hard enough, you know what I mean, that they've gotten to that point. Now, if they leave it, there's a sense of FOMO of like, what about all that effort that I put in? I've already got all this stuff. What's the next stuff that I could get? And I mean, RPGs are hard because it's just like, I want them perps. I want the perps. I want the epics items. That's what I want. I want the epics. I want the legendaries, right? But like when you're in that early game, it's always this crappy lull of like, oh great, another common. Oh great, great, an uncommon thing. A rusty
Yeah.
sword. It's like nobody wants this. I want the big flaming, flaming thing. Like
Yeah.
I want a hammer, dude. I want a big, big hammer. That's what I want.
And Raid Shadow Legends is a great example of a game whose design, again, I'm going to talk about the design core of some of these that make the game scalable. It's these hero battler games are just every stage they just throw like random mobs at you and they just increase the HP.
Yeah,
And honestly, nobody really pays attention to what they're fighting at all. Like they might look at their screen a little bit, but they're just hitting next, next, next. They're progressing really fast and getting more loot. But yeah, in Raid Shadow Legends, if you give them, if somebody, let's say they spend $1,000, they have, let's say they gained 1,000,000 times more power than they originally had. Does not matter. It pushes them into more content. They do not run out of content. It's because the game is inherently scalable, and that is kind of the lesson I'm learning for mobile specifically. It probably still applies a little to Steam, but probably not as hard because in Steam, I'm sorry, in a paid game, you usually control the pacing. So you're like, whatever, 60 hours of play, here you go. But in a mobile game, because you usually pay for progression, you need to be able to handle somebody who spends $1,000 in your game.
yeah. Like you got to think about where the walls and gates are too. You know what I mean? But yes, you're totally right. Like what this is like the spend cycle. So it's like I'm spending to get through content or like get through a hard point. So the game gets infinitely easier for a minute. But then all of a sudden then I burn through all that content and then I get back up to where now my new power level is, and then it dips back down into hard mode, right? And I'm back now in that spend cycle. And it's the delta between like how far will a $20 stretch there to get me more power, to get me through like the next set of content is like a huge thing. So like $500 might in a in an RPG game like that, team battler, character battler RPG, $100 might only get me to like upgrade one more level on each of my characters, but $1,000 will get me a whole team. So it's like
Yeah.
that's a humongous depth of spend to try and get that great feeling of like pushing through content and being overpowered. But that feeling of being overpowered is connected to the moment of spend. So players are always thinking about like, well, for that $20, what did I get? And if they don't feel like that the purchase gave them the power in the game to make them feel powerful in those moments, then they're less inclined to make that make that next purchase the next time as well too. So
Yeah.
it's important just to like keep in mind that like content stretching is fine, and making sure that you just have like good balance models that you know that you can just say at any level like where is the player and how is it going to continue to move up, and you have that. I mean, if your towers are your characters and power is always increasing and you're just increasing your maybe over time just unlocking new abilities for those things, you know what I mean, those things to do, those things cap out at some point, but like figure out then like what's the next thing, because think again, I mean, we've talked about this plenty of times, but like when there was light, there was gear stats, and that's all we had. Jesus slept after the seventh day, and there was just gear stats. And then 60 days later, a PM comes over and says, the player base has already gained the highest gear stats. What
Yeah.
do we do
Yeah.
now? We need to do something. Oh, gem slots. Oh, now we've got gems as a progression tree. It's like now we got to get all the gear stats and all the gems. Oh, 60 days later, they already have all the gems, and there was no real decision there. They just had to go and grind it. Oh, rune forging. What if they could change reroll stats on their gear? What? And then all of a sudden, it's all of these things. Maybe I can enchant my gear. Maybe I can do this, right? So how do I have some core that over time I can like add new features to, build progression up, change the progression
Yeah.
trees, make these things different vectors for power, but those things then push the player into decisions of how do they want to interact with your game too. Maybe you only get gems from higher level content. Well, great. If I want those big gems, I can either grind and get like the little small gems and then craft them up into the bigger gem, and do that whole lattice tree, that like 10 to 1 type of thing. Or I don't need to do that at all, and I say explicitly like, you want that gem, you have to get into that content, and if you have to get into that high level content, you have to get the gear, and if you don't have the gear reinforces you like where you are in the game, like what levels you're actually moving to, and then tries to direct you into which pathways that you should go. If it's all one pathway, then it's all one pathway. The player's looking for that one reward. So it is hard. I mean, the big thing here is that like you could do all of these stuff and it could all still fail. That's the sad thing about it,
Sure.
right? Like we were looking
Yeah.
at like the App Store stuff and just talking about App Store optimization, and just looking at that like marketing 5 panel between a couple of different games, and there's clear patterns if you look into the market of what works and what doesn't work, or at least what seems to be the engager that most major companies are going for. And it's you know annoyingly like almost every game has this hero story now, like save them, and it's
Yeah.
always like keywords, like the first word is, there's always one massive word, and it's bigger than the whole other thing. And then there's this very, three word sentence underneath it that says like, the rest of the line. So it's like, could be like, play an entertaining game, right? Or some stupid secondary
Yeah.
line like that, right? But like these things, though, 1/8 banners at the bottom or at the top that are usually highly contrasted to the actual screenshot image. One character that's static on the image, with so that there's like three layers then to it. There's the background image of the gameplay, the character that's on top of that, and then the banner underneath it that then is saying that keyword. And I swear, like, you can find, you know 20, 30 games that are just exactly like
Absolutely.
that, what I mean, within the main spectrum. So this is where we would always say, like, don't this isn't where you need to innovate. This is where you need to, like, look at the community and content and say, what are they doing? What are the games that are performing? And and like exactly, like, what are they doing, right? How are they structuring their things? And just literally fucking rob it. Just go into the app store, grab three, four, five different games, screenshots, throw them into Figma, map your owns on top of them, and try to plot that journey between all of the games. But it is a strange one, though. It is a strange one.
Yeah, I think with any game, like there's of course a game side and then there's a marketing side. But then when you talk about, let's just say, mobile marketing, it's totally different than traditional marketing. And Steam's probably a little bit closer to traditional marketing, but Steam's got its own tricks of the trade as well. So how do you how have you learned it? Is it just looking at the successful designs, or do you know of any other resources for learning this stuff?
Like, just on marketing by itself, or
I would say how App Store design. I guess there
oh,
probably is a lot of material. I was just curious how you approach it.
genuinely, it is a lot of just looking at the app store and key performers over time, and just knowing the trend that's going on, right? Like, if you're playing enough games and you're paying enough attention to the app store, you'll see the trends kind of emerge from all of these places. It's the same thing too. It's like you're scrolling around online, and like, Instagram is a great place to just see ads. So like, if you're like us, like, you should go seek out, like, don't turn on ad blocker, like, seek out the ads, right? So find them and see how are people then marketing their games. And then also, it's just like about knowing your genre and your side of the market. Like, if you're trying to enter into a marketplace, into a certain genre, and everybody has already got some established narrative in somewhere, you need to either make sure that you're living up to that standard, but you're also then seeing what they're doing and surpassing them. So these things also just help to just go and say, like, what if the games that are in my market are doing the best, and that they're going this way, well, then maybe they've done a bunch of A/B testing also to get to that point too. And maybe in that A/B testing, they've made some learnings that you're just not there yet, and you don't have time to spend and learn against those A/B tests. So you kind of just use that as your starting base, and you can fly off from there. And you don't have to agree with it, but style and structure, I think, is the more important thing. Content within those panels is obviously important, but, like, weirdly enough, like, if you look at the industry as a whole on the App Store, the actual structure of those making those things as clear as possible, that structure is, I think, is like a process by itself that can be extrapolated from as many games as you can, right? And I mean, but again, like, it's just gonna feel to a lot of people like, oh, well, we're just copying, we're just copying, we're just copying. You're not copying. You're taking intrinsic learnings that other teams have, or at least you're making the statement of, hopefully these people have made learnings more than I have. I'm going to this is the industry standard for my thing, and I'm not trying to just, like, do this on my own because I don't know what's going to necessarily work, but I have a model for success over here, so let's go towards the model of success. And yeah,
Yeah. No, you're definitely right. Like copying is not inherently a bad thing. And although if you are gonna lift something, you should definitely eventually figure out why it works that way. And I guess, like I said, that's sort of the kind of lessons I'm learning. And for example, like all these RPG systems, if you go on mobile and look at all the top games, they all have RPG systems at this point. And even gaming in general, I think have it's so hard to find a game that doesn't have an RPG system at this point. And just isolating that, like for example, if you take a JRPG game on mobile, like you said earlier, RPGs just naturally have lots of vectors. It has both attacking stats, you can have like 8 of them,
yeah,
crit hit, crit rate. They're all effectively the same. And then you can have like 20 HP defense stats, and now you have 16 stats to play with. It lets you itemize more. It lets you have all kinds of content that rewards you in different ways. So, like that's kind of something I just slowly learned through this process. It's like, man, figure out a core if you want to be able to extend it, figure out a core gameplay that lets you have lots of stats, and then that RPG naturally bubbles up. And then another trend I'll explain is so Vampire Survivor games. There's probably 60 to 80 of these on Steam now,
oh
and
my god,
probably 300 on mobile. I'm just guessing. It is the hot new genre, um, and one reason it works, especially for indies, is the procedural generation is such a cheap um, content treadmill. You make a few skills that kind of synergize with each other in different ways, and you just throw it at them randomly as they play the game. So it's kind of like a slot machine, and bam, it's like easy to code up, and people are just replaying over and over.
and balance doesn't really matter all that much because
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
it's messy by trade, right? Like
Yes.
this is the thing. I was watching this animator video, and they were like, "Don't underestimate the laziness of individuals," right? And it's like it's okay to kind of be lazy with it sometimes, right? Because like
Yeah.
that jankiness also then can play into the gameplay of it all. Yeah, it's crazy. The vampires thing shouldn't make sense to me. It shouldn't. It still doesn't really make sense, and this is like one of those things where like in my model, I'm overthinking what's fun, right? To me, that those vampire survival games are not fun. There's nothing fun about them to me. It's just like, oh, cool. I move a character around a box, and they just like attack and hit other characters
Sometimes you don't even move
automatically.
the character. If
Yeah,
you get the right skills, you just AFK for
just
15
AFK,
minutes.
and it's like, well, cool. Like, oh, big numbers. Oh, it's like you're fucking dumb, dude. Like, you're fucking you're. I mean, should I put a carrot on a fucking literal carrot on a stick and just dangle it in front of you and use you for perpetual motion? Like, fucking, what the fuck, dude? But
And I love these games, so I'm just gonna call you a boomer with games.
I am
Get with the
absolutely a boomer.
trends. Get with the trends.
I am absolutely a boomer when it comes to these things. Absolutely. But here's the thing, right? With all of these things, I was watching some other video a while ago, and they were talking about. I remember we were talking about it too. It's just like almost every single game is just conflict. It is we give you stats and me stats, and we attack each other and fight. Right? How many games just have that? First person shooters, third person shooters, like everything is a shooter. Everything is like I fire projectile. Like the hardest thing is like trying to come up with a game with no combat and make those as entertaining as the games with conflict, because
I agree.
games with stats and characters and death and everything like that has an intrinsic replayability of just like how those enemies are going to come at me, what's the pillars in the way that I can use to defend myself or attack or anything else, right? Like, but those things create a sense of like partial randomness, but randomness within the exact same action of that I'm always doing at the same time, right? So little strategies can become emergent from those moments, right? Just because of how the waves are coming at you or how everything else. But at the end of the day, most of games, period, have this like baseline level of attack conflict resolution, and
Yeah.
it's a hard place to live if you're going away from that. And I think that if you just want to look at innovation in the industry as a whole, like how do we innovate away from like every game has to have shooting and magic and killing and everything else, right? And that's where I think like games like Undertale have
Yeah.
shown, because you can play a passive round. You don't need to necessarily do that. And but it's hard because it's like we're just, as humans, we're built around this idea of leveling up, progression right now, right? Or at least within this context of this area, and yeah, like how do we build it away from just endless conflict and battle and battle and battle?
Yeah, totally agree. It's a really interesting subject. And of course there's games like Stardew that do all right, but like I'll give a quick example of just moving a little bit on the spectrum. So Dead by Daylight was free to play this weekend, and that's a 1v4 game. And another 1v4 game that came out recently is the Ghostbusters game. The Ghostbusters game is E for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
The Dead by Daylight is very violent, incredibly violent. You are thrown onto a hook and you struggle there as a spider eats you alive. Um,
Amazing.
so, yeah, I played them both. Dead by Daylight, I think, is vastly inferior in terms of gameplay design. It is an older game. I mean, this was made 5 or 7 years ago now.
But those
So it,
those four you know those 4-to-1 games were never there weren't really a whole lot going on, because you had those like very set interaction points, and once you saw it and did it one time, it's like, oh, I'm gonna play that exact same animation every single time I go to that
yeah,
hook.
yeah,
So it's like, okay, screaming nerd, screaming nerd, screaming nerd. Ah!
yep, yep.
Fucking dump them out.
Yeah. So I'll very quickly say like the gameplay issue with Dead by Daylight, playing as a survivor sucks. If you queue as a survivor, you are instantly put into a match. If you queue as the killer, that was a 5 to 10 minute wait because there's like what fun is there in running away and hiding and getting your ass kicked and thrown on the hooks constantly?
And there's no way to
Right?
fight back.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there are ways. There are ways. You shine flashlights, you throw boxes at them. It's like not as cool.
Yeah.
But then you take the Ghostbusters game. I never had any issues with queues. Now it was launch week, so I might have been wrong about that. But man, when you play against one of the four, you play as a Ghostbuster, and you are hunting the ghost. It's not the other way around.
Oh, I like that.
So now the queues were stabilized because everyone wants to kind of play everything. Now here's the issue, or not the issue. Here's the thing I observed though. When I played Dead by Daylight, I was sweating. I was sweating whether I was playing as the survivor or the killer. It was extremely intense. It was to your point about humans. The most lizard of our brains is about survival and hunting down to the very core, and so I had a much stronger emotional reaction playing that game.
You just didn't want to be last, dude. You just didn't want to be last. You were like, I'm a big boy. I'm a big boy gamer over here. I'm fucking beating all of them. Like, the
Yeah,
hell with all these other survivors. I'm coming
yeah,
last.
exactly.
Can't touch this. You're just like, you're the rabbit. Just running
So
around the
yeah,
place.
well, you're talking about how can we move away from combat, and you're right. There is plenty of innovation space, but the that core appeal is going to be hard to replicate
Yeah,
when there's no violence and seven sins going on.
absolutely. And to go back, like, that's why Nuzly is not just a bubble pop game. It's not just the mass market, try to, slow follow like any of these other titles and just focus on bubble pop. The innovation is that narrative as a driver is going to be enough that's going to also fill the holes in the experience that we will lack in other aspects of the game, right? Like, we can't beat Candy Crush in gameplay. We probably can, but because it's so old now. But Like we can't beat some of these games on the marketplace in just gameplay and creativity of level design, right? Because that's not where our focus is, and it's never been our focus because we never felt like if we're going to be battling, we're battling on their territory, and we'll just get outspent. We can't do that, right? We don't have $1 million to blow on UA if we're having a bad week. You know what I mean? So we had to find something else that was more engaging, but still had that wrapper and that basis that stuck us in that marketplace, but tried to make it is going to try to make it stand out there. And I wish them all the luck, like within this last month, and at least just seeing just getting to a point where the game launches anywhere is just a humongous achievement for any team and any group, in my opinion. And it'll be cool to see. You know what I mean? I think
Yeah.
on the 4-1 games, I think that like none of them super intrigue me at all.
That's
Maybe because
interesting because you sort of like PvP and
I always find same thing with the social deduction games. I just always find that it's the same thing over and over and over again. The loop is not satisfying and sticky enough for me to make me feel good about it. Like Left 4 Dead is obviously a different kind of, you know, 4-1 game, right? U4
yeah.
versus, CPU
Yeah.
zombies.
And there is PvP, but it's 4v4, so it's a little different.
A little different. And even the PvP is like hard because like yeah, I don't know. Some of the characters are just like kind of BS, right? Like in balance wise, like they can just kind of hit you from across the map a little bit more, and it's like it's not that great. But one of the ones that I will put on your radar is the the VR one, where one player is in VR and is controlling a VR mannequin, the hands and the head, and they're 1,000 times bigger than all of the other player characters.
God.
And the player characters are all not in VR, they're all just like playing like a console game. So it's big boss battle, like 4/8 versus one,
That's funny.
but the one is a VR character, and it's a literal like think of like they're the massive dragon that's in front of you. They're actually you can just see them in VR fucking moving around like they're
Yeah.
so to me like that's interesting because all of a sudden like that conflict has been a little reconstituted across two different mediums that also then plays into a sense of scale and reality. It's like all of a sudden like that boss has now changed. Like you've literally taken Ragnaros and said, no, Ragnaros is now a VR character and this person's literally moving, and
Yeah.
you're like, oh fuck, like this is the most intelligent boss that I've ever seen, or the dumbest. Like who knows? You know what I mean, right? But it's not set wave things where it's like, here's phase 1, then there's phase 2, and we only do these abilities, and then you kill the boss, and then all of a sudden, dun dun dun, it's phase 3, right? Like the boss gets back up. Like we need to get away from these things, but it's hard to do that when you have to also then think about the entire game around it and build all of that too. Like you could go deep and subset into one boss and go make that like the coolest individual experience possible. But is that a game? And is that your game? It's like, can you
Well,
then take
and
that and replicate that into all of the other bosses? Because it's not. You can't. So we always end
that's
up in the same pattern.
that's the thing about VR. Almost all VR games don't stretch out their content at all. They just have the cool demo and that's it. And people are happy apparently.
Yeah, this is, I can't just pay some people to. What am I doing over here? I don't know, but yeah, there's just so much stuff around all of like the launch prep that needs to be looked at, needs to be done. Um, but it's just nice to be working in those spaces, right? Isn't it nice to be like getting down to that wire?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'd say so, for sure.
you can finally see the end, which I think is uh, an important thing for just psyche. You know, when everything just feels like a hole, and you're just like, when the fuck is this gonna end? Is this gonna be right? Is this gonna be good? Right? Like you can kind of finally take that step back and say, okay, now where do we go from here? Like we've hit a natural pivot point. Like what is it really missing? Those
Yeah.
those things can be great moments.
And there's a little bit of a relief to it too because like kind of we pointed out before, you may not make your target money. Like if you wanted 2 million, maybe you won't hit that. But honestly, any game at least makes something if you like follow some really basic principles. If you just throw out your game like total crapshoot, yeah, you might make $200 on Steam. But if you actually follow like very very simple principles, you can make like 5,000, like pretty easily
Yeah.
in some ways.
And
So
then think if you can take those and grow them as IPs. Then think about it if you can take those things so that you start, first year it was 5,000, next year it's 10,000. Well, it's like that's a 50% revenue increase. It's also
right.
like, I mean, it's a third of some people's yearly paycheck, you know. So if you're still working that side job and still working that other thing, I mean, it's like all these fucking rappers, right? Like I'm making money in my sleep, right? Like you wake up the next day and you're excited to just keep checking that cha-ching, that bank account, and
Right.
just see like, oh yeah, how much am I getting from ad revenue this month? Like, oh, I just made $300 like just off of ads this month. Like, awesome. I mean, now you're $200 from a PS5. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
and it just kind of came off of the back. Maybe then that's what then you go and say like, if you can put out two or three of those things, like hey, like now we're seriously talking, right? And you can do that if you have 18-month cycles and you're knowledgeable and know how to like work into a space correctly, then you can find success. It doesn't have to be this like this is it. It's this one. This game has to do it. It's like no. It's like if that game makes you, 10 grand a year, 7 grand a year, like maybe it's not worth your time. Maybe it is, but maybe it's more worth your time if you have two or three of them that can do that. Now, everybody's chasing lightning in a bottle, and if you're, it's never guaranteed money when you're doing these things, and the thing is like least amount of the less downloads you have, the less you're going to be put up in the charts. The less you put up in the charts, the less organics you'll get. The less organics, the less traffic. Everything just compounds on itself, so then your game just naturally kind of dies off as soon as it starts. But maybe the nice thing is, at least about these things, is like if nobody's looking at your game, nobody knows it exists still. So great, awesome. I'm relaunching. You know what I
There
mean?
you
Like,
go. There you go.
you
Nice.
know, yeah, like nobody knew, nobody cared. So there it is, right? And I'm gonna do some different things, and I'm gonna try to optimize around a few things and go
Right.
again.
Prove some numbers. Maybe approach a publisher who can give you some know-how on that side of things, and give it another shot.
Absolutely, yeah. But how long have we been going for? Are we good?
It's about time to wrap up. But
Yeah.
yeah, I will say, um, if you follow all the advice on this podcast, I guarantee you'll quit your job. That's our guarantee, money back guarantee.
You will definitely quit. You'll definitely quit something. I don't know. You'll probably quit this. You'll
Yeah, I didn't say you'll quit and make money. You'll just quit. Yeah.
absolutely. You'll just quit. Yo, shout out to Randy, the number one homie, bro.
Yeah.
Also, we did get one more Patreon, so we are 50% up
Oh, damn.
on our Patreon. And again,
Man. It's
so
like one egg.
we're making $2. It's fine. I like the thing is like the point of the thing is mostly of just engagement. It's like, are we even doing something that people are willing to even watch and give $1 for? And if we can get 100 people to say yes that we've done it, then we've figured out this format and how to get it into a place that makes sense. And again, then think about like video games. Then how do you scale from there? It's like for us right now, we just want to try to, I don't know, put out the best rambling of content possible. But
There you go.
it's also just a messaging point for us to be able to talk to each other. And
Okay, so yeah, Patreon number 2, very much appreciated.
yeah, who's gonna be number three? Who's gonna be number three? I need. It'd be nice to be able to like say that my coffee once a month is paid for, but the Patreon still takes that cut, so it's looking more like 175 right now. All right, Calvin, thank you.
All right, good chat.
I'll talk to you later, dude.